Dear listeners, a new day and a new story to discuss. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that interests me. Listen and write down what you think about this situation. I'm interested in your opinions. I remember the moment vividly. It was a chilly evening in Alabama, the kind where the breeze whispers secrets through the leaves. My name is Ethan, a 47-year-old man who's about to confess a tale of sorrow and folly. There I was, sitting in the dim light of our living room, the shadows playing across the walls as if mocking my despair. Ethan, you've been so distant lately. What's on your mind? Eliza's voice broke the silence, her words laced with concern. I looked at her, the woman I had loved since high school. Her eyes, once bright with laughter, now searched mine with worry. It's nothing, just work stress, I lied, feeling the weight of my deceit. She moved closer, her hand finding mine. You're not yourself. Talk to me, Ethan. We've always shared everything. I wanted to tell her, to spill out the dark secret gnawing at my soul, but fear held my tongue. Eliza, my voice trailed off, lost in the ocean of guilt inside me. Her eyes narrowed slightly, sensing something amiss. Is there someone else, Ethan? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. No, of course not, I said too quickly, the lie tasting bitter in my mouth. She pulled back, hurt flickering in her eyes. You've never lied to me before. Why start now? I'm not lying, Eliza, I insisted, hating myself for the falsehoods. Eliza stood up, her figure silhouetted against the fading light. I don't know what's happened to you, Ethan, but I miss my husband, the man I married. I watched her walk away, my heart aching. I thought of Ava, the younger woman who had inexplicably captivated me. Our meetings, initially innocent, had quickly spiraled into something more. Something reckless. Flashback to a week earlier. Ava, we shouldn't be doing this, I whispered as she laughed, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Why not, Ethan? We're just two people enjoying each other's company, she replied, her hand tracing patterns on my arm. Her touch was electric, setting my senses ablaze. But I'm a married man, I protested weakly, even as I leaned closer. And I'm a free spirit. We're not hurting anyone, she countered, her lips inches from mine. That was the moment I should have walked away. But instead, I succumbed to the temptation, to the thrill of the forbidden. Now, back in the present, the weight of my actions crushed me. My mind replayed the lies I had told Eliza, the stolen moments with Ava. I had betrayed the woman who had been my rock, my partner through life's ups and downs. Dad, is everything okay with you and Mom? My son, Alex, asked later that night, his young face filled with concern. Everything's fine, son, I lied again, hating myself for deceiving my own flesh and blood. He nodded, not entirely convinced. You know you can talk to me, right? I'm always here for you, Dad. I ruffled his hair, grateful for his innocence. I know, Alex. Thanks. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, Eliza's quiet breathing beside me, guilt and regret were my only companions. I realized the enormity of my mistake, the potential cost of my selfish desires. But it was too late. The seeds of betrayal were sown, and the consequences were yet to unfold. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the quaint streets of our Alabama town as I drove to meet Ava. The radio played softly, but my mind was elsewhere, tangled in a web of confusion and excitement. I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was diving headfirst into a storm, yet the thrill of the forbidden was too intoxicating to resist. As I parked near the cafe where Ava and I had agreed to meet, my hands were trembling slightly. Get a grip, Ethan, I muttered to myself, but my self-reassurance felt hollow. Stepping into the cafe, I spotted Ava immediately. She was sitting by the window, her silhouette bathed in the soft evening light. She looked up and smiled, a smile that always seemed to see right through me. Ethan, over here, she called out, waving me over. As I approached, she stood up and greeted me with a hug. Her closeness sent a jolt through me. I'm glad you could make it, she whispered. Sitting down, I tried to steady my nerves. I shouldn't be here, Ava. It's not right. Ava's eyes held mine, intense and unflinching. Life's too short for regrets, Ethan. We're not doing anything wrong. We're just two people enjoying a conversation. But I'm married, I said, the words tasting like ash. And I respect that, Ava replied smoothly. We're just friends, aren't we? I nodded, though her definition of friends seemed to blur the lines more than I was comfortable with. The conversation flowed easily as we talked about everything and nothing. Ava laughed at my jokes, her hand occasionally brushing mine. It was a dangerous dance, each touch a step closer to the edge of a precipice I knew I shouldn't approach. Then Ava's tone changed, becoming more serious. Ethan, tell me honestly, are you happy in your marriage? The question caught me off guard. I I don't know. I used to be. Ava leaned in closer. Sometimes we don't realize what we're missing until we find it elsewhere. Her words echoed in my head, a siren song luring me further away from the safe harbor of my marriage. The cafe began to empty, the sky outside darkening. Ava's gaze held a promise, an invitation to step into a world I knew I should avoid. But the part of me that craved excitement, that yearned for something different, was winning. Do you want to go somewhere more private? Ava asked, her voice barely above a whisper. My heart raced. Every moral fiber in me screamed to say no, to get up and go back to my wife, my family. But the words that came out were, yes. We left the cafe, the night air cool against my flushed skin. As we walked to her car, I felt like I was in a dream, a surreal journey through my own desires and fears. Ava drove us to a secluded spot overlooking the city. The view was breathtaking, the city lights twinkling like distant stars. But it was Ava who held my attention. She turned to me, her eyes reflecting the city lights. Ethan, I don't want to be a homewrecker. If you want to leave, I'll understand. I looked at her, torn between guilt and desire. I should leave, I admitted. But I don't want to. That was all the confirmation Ava needed. She leaned in, and our lips met in a kiss that sealed my fate. It was a kiss of betrayal, a fall from grace that I couldn't stop. As the night deepened, so did my descent. The world outside our bubble ceased to exist. In those moments, I was lost in the exhilaration of the forbidden, the heat of passion clouding my judgment. Ethan, are you sure about this? Ava asked as our embrace grew more intense. Yes, I lied, both to her and to myself. Inside, I was a battleground of conflicting emotions. Yet, the desire to feel alive, to feel wanted, overpowered everything else. We spent hours there, under the starlit sky, giving in to a passion that should have remained untouched. With each passing moment, the reality of my life, my marriage, my family, seemed to drift further away. Finally, as the first hints of dawn painted the sky, reality began to seep back in. I looked at Ava, her face serene in the dim morning light, and a wave of remorse washed over me. I need to go home, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Ava nodded, a knowing sadness in her eyes. I understand, Ethan. Just know, this doesn't have to be goodbye. Driving back home, the world felt different, as if I had crossed an invisible line from which there was no return. The early morning streets were deserted, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. As I pulled into the driveway, the house loomed before me, a symbol of all I was risking. I sat there for a moment, trying to gather the courage to face Eliza. Stepping inside, the house was silent, the familiar surroundings now feeling foreign. I tiptoed to our bedroom, where Eliza was still asleep, innocent to the betrayal that had just unfolded. I changed and slid into bed beside her, her presence a painful reminder of the life I was jeopardizing. Lying there, I watched her sleep, her face peaceful, unaware of the storm that was brewing. Guilt gnawed at me, the weight of my actions heavier than I had anticipated. I realized then that what had started as a quest for excitement had turned into a path of self-destruction. As the sun rose, casting light into the room, Eliza stirred. She turned to me, her eyes still heavy with sleep. Ethan, you're home late. Is everything okay? She mumbled, her voice filled with sleepy concern. I forced a smile, a mask to hide the chaos within. Everything's fine, just had to clear my head. She nodded, accepting my answer, and snuggled closer. I wrapped my arm around her, but the embrace felt hollow. In that moment, I was acutely aware of the immense gap that had formed between us, a chasm created by my own hands. As Eliza drifted back to sleep, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The events of the night replayed in my mind, a loop of temptation and regret. I knew then that I had fallen from the grace of the life I had built. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear, I couldn't unmake the choices I had made. The dawn of a new day brought no solace, only the harsh light of reality and the crushing burden of my secret. The air was thick with tension as I sat at the kitchen table, my fingers tapping a nervous rhythm against the wood. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second echoing in the silence of our Alabama home. I couldn't shake off the feeling of impending doom. It had been a few weeks since the night with Ava, and the guilt was eating me alive. Eliza walked into the kitchen, her expression unreadable. She placed a cup of coffee in front of me, the steam swirling up like the storm brewing inside me. Ethan, we need to talk, she said, her voice steady but her eyes betraying a storm of emotions. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. About what, Eliza? She sat down opposite me, her hands clasped tightly. I know about her, Ethan. I know about Ava. My heart sank. The moment I had dreaded was unfolding right before my eyes. Eliza, I can explain. Explain what? Ethan, how you lied to me. How you betrayed our marriage. Her voice was rising, laced with pain and anger. I never meant to hurt you. It just happened, I stammered, my words sounding feeble even to my ears. Just happened? You make it sound like an accident. Was it an accident, Ethan? Eliza's eyes were brimming with tears. I reached out to touch her hand, but she pulled away. Please, Eliza, let me explain. She shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. What's there to explain? That you found someone younger, more exciting? That I wasn't enough for you? No, it's not like that. I was lost, confused. I didn't know what I was doing, I pleaded, my own eyes stinging with unshed tears. Lost? Confused? You were selfish, Ethan. You thought only of yourself, not of me, not of our children, Eliza said, her voice breaking. I had no defense, no words to counter the truth of her accusations. I'm sorry, Eliza. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't change what you did. It doesn't erase the betrayal, she said, wiping away a tear. The room fell silent, the only sound being the ticking of the clock. It was as if time itself was judging me, marking each second of my betrayal. Did you love her? Eliza's question was a whisper, but it hit me like a thunderclap. No, it was never about love. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake, I answered, my voice barely audible. Eliza stood up, her body trembling with emotion. I don't know if I can get past this, Ethan. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. I stood up too, desperation clawing at me. Please, Eliza, don't say that. We can work through this. I'll do anything. She looked at me, her eyes a mirror of the pain I had caused. I need time, Ethan. I need space to think, to decide what I want. With those words, she left the room, leaving me alone with my guilt and regret. The silence was deafening, each tick of the clock a reminder of what I had done. As I sat there, lost in my thoughts, the doorbell rang. I hesitated, but eventually got up to answer it. Standing on the doorstep was Ava, her eyes searching mine. Ethan, we need to talk, she said, her voice filled with urgency. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. What are you doing here, Ava? You shouldn't be here. Ava looked at me, a hint of defiance in her eyes. I needed to see you, to talk to you. I know about Eliza. My heart sank further. How do you know? I saw her yesterday. She confronted me, Ava replied, her voice tinged with guilt. I ran a hand through my hair, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. This is a mess, Ava. A terrible mess. Ava stepped closer, her hand reaching out to touch mine. I'm sorry, Ethan. I never wanted to cause you trouble. I looked at her, the woman who had been a catalyst in the unraveling of my life. It's not your fault, Ava. It's mine. I made the choice. But I was part of that choice, she said softly. I shook my head, feeling a surge of resolve. I need to fix this, Ava. I need to try and make things right with Eliza. Ava nodded, a sad smile on her lips. I understand. Just know that I never meant to come between you and your family. I sighed, a mix of relief and sorrow washing over me. I know, but it's time for me to face the consequences of my actions. We stood there for a moment, the early morning sun casting long shadows on the ground. Then Ava turned to leave, her footsteps echoing the finality of our conversation. I watched her go, feeling a chapter of my life closing. But the hardest part was yet to come, facing Eliza, facing my family, and facing myself. Returning inside, the house felt different, as if the walls themselves were aware of the turmoil within. I found Eliza in the living room, her back to me, staring out the window. Eliza, I began, my voice unsteady. I want to make things right. She didn't turn around. Can you, Ethan? Can you undo what you've done? The pain in her voice cut through me. I know I can't change the past, but I want to try. I want to rebuild what I've broken. Eliza finally turned to face me, her eyes reflecting a deep well of hurt. I don't know if I can, Ethan. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way. I took a step towards her, my heart aching. Please, give me a chance. I'll do whatever it takes. Eliza looked at me, her gaze searching my soul. I need time, Ethan. Time to heal, time to think. I can't make any promises. I nodded, understanding the enormity of what I was asking of her. I'll give you all the time you need. I'm here, whenever you're ready. The distance between us felt like a chasm, yet I hoped that with time and effort, it could be bridged. As Eliza walked past me, her shoulder brushed mine, a fleeting touch that spoke volumes. In that touch, I felt a glimmer of hope, a faint possibility of redemption. I watched her go, knowing that the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. But I was ready to face them, to do whatever it took to mend the broken pieces of our life. The house settled back into silence, a silence that was both a comfort and a reminder of the work that lay ahead. I knew that the journey to forgiveness and healing would be the hardest one I'd ever undertake. But for Eliza, for our family, it was a journey I was willing to make. The days that followed were a blur of tension and unspoken words. I moved through the house like a ghost, haunted by the repercussions of my actions. Eliza and I coexisted in a strained silence, each avoiding the elephant in the room. The air was thick with unshed tears and unasked questions. My son, Alex, and daughter, Amelia, sensed the shift. Their once bright and cheerful home had become a somber place, heavy with the weight of my betrayal. "Dad, is everything okay with you and Mom?" Alex asked one evening, his eyes filled with concern. We were sitting in the living room, the TV playing a show none of us were watching. I sighed, unsure how much to reveal. "Your mom and I are going through a tough time, son, but we're trying to work things out." Amelia, who had been quiet, finally spoke up. "Is it because of what you did, Dad?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it pierced the room like a gunshot. I looked at her, her expression a mixture of confusion and hurt. "Yes, Amelia. I made a mistake, a big one, and I'm trying to fix it." Alex's brow furrowed. "But what did you do, Dad?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. I knew I couldn't lie to them, not anymore. "I was unfaithful to your mom," I admitted, the words tasting bitter. The shock on their faces was immediate. Amelia's eyes welled up with tears, and Alex's expression hardened. "How could you do that to Mom?" Alex's voice was tinged with anger, his usual calm demeanor shattered. "I wish I had a good answer, son. I lost my way, and I hurt your mom, and I hurt you both." "I'm so sorry," I said, my own voice breaking. Amelia stood up abruptly, tears streaming down her face. "I can't believe you did this, Dad. You've ruined everything." She ran out of the room, her sobs echoing through the house. Alex stood up, his disappointment palpable. "I need some air," he muttered before following his sister out of the room. I sat there, alone in the dimly lit room, the weight of my family's pain crushing me. I had not only damaged my marriage, but I had also shattered the trust of my children. In the following days, Eliza and I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy for the kids' sake. But our interactions were stilted, the hurt and betrayal hanging between us like a thick fog. One evening, as we were clearing the dinner table, Eliza finally spoke. "Ethan, we need to talk about what happens next." I nodded, my stomach nodding. "I know. I'll do whatever you need, Eliza. Counseling, therapy, anything." She paused, collecting her thoughts. "I appreciate that, Ethan, but I need space. I need to figure out if I can move past this." I felt a pang of fear, the possibility of losing her becoming more real. "I understand. I'll do whatever you need." Eliza looked at me, her eyes searching mine. "I think it's best if you stay somewhere else for a while. Give us both some time to think." The idea of leaving my home, my family, was unbearable, but I knew she was right. "Okay, I'll stay at a hotel. Just know, I'm here whenever you're ready." We stood there, the remnants of our life together scattered around us. The silence was heavy, filled with the unsaid and the undone. The next day, I packed a bag with the essentials, each item a reminder of the life I had jeopardized. As I zipped up the bag, Amelia walked into the room. "Are you leaving, Dad?" Her voice was small, vulnerable. I knelt down, meeting her eyes. "Just for a little while, sweetheart. Your mom and I need some time to figure things out. Will you come back?" Her eyes were filled with tears, mirroring my own. "I hope so, Amelia. I love you, and I love your mom. I'm going to do everything I can to fix this," I said, hugging her tightly. She nodded, clinging to me. "I love you too, Dad." Leaving the house was one of the hardest things I had ever done. I got into my car, the bag in the passenger seat a stark reminder of my reality. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror, the image of my family standing in the doorway seared into my memory. The hotel room was impersonal and cold, a far cry from the warmth of my home. Lying on the bed, I stared at the ceiling, the events of the past weeks replaying in my mind. I had fallen from grace, and the fallout was more devastating than I could have ever imagined. But amidst the ruin, I held on to a sliver of hope, a chance to rebuild and redeem myself. In the quiet of the hotel room, I made a vow to myself to do everything in my power to heal the wounds I had inflicted on my family. It was a long road ahead, but one I was willing to travel for the sake of those I loved. Days turned into weeks in the small, impersonal hotel room. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, each day blending into the next in a monotonous loop. I spent hours staring out of the window, watching life go on outside while mine stood painfully still. I kept in touch with Eliza and the kids, but our conversations were brief and filled with an underlying tension. Each call was a reminder of the distance my actions had created, a gap that seemed to widen with every passing day. One evening, I called Eliza, my heart heavy with longing and regret. "How are you?" I asked, the words feeling inadequate. "We're managing, Ethan. The kids miss you, but they're still hurt." Eliza's voice was calm, but I could hear the strain beneath. "I miss you all so much." "I'm so sorry for everything, Eliza. If there's anything I can do," my voice trailed off, the helplessness overwhelming. "We're taking it one day at a time. That's all we can do right now," she replied. The call ended with a polite goodbye, but it left me feeling more isolated than before. I sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands, the weight of my mistakes crushing me. Days later, I decided to visit a nearby park, needing to escape the confines of the hotel room. The park was filled with families and laughter, a stark contrast to the loneliness I felt. I found a secluded bench and sat down, watching a father play catch with his son. The sight brought back memories of Alex and Amelia when they were younger, of happier times when our family was whole. "Ethan," a familiar voice called out. I looked up to see Mike, an old friend from college. "Mike." "Hey," I greeted, forcing a smile. He sat down next to me, concern etched on his face. "I heard about what happened. How are you holding up?" I sighed, the facade crumbling. "Not great, to be honest. I've made a mess of things." Mike nodded, his expression sympathetic. "Is there anything I can do to help?" I shook my head. "I appreciate it, but this is something I need to fix myself. I just don't know where to start." Mike patted my shoulder. "You'll figure it out, Ethan. You're a good guy who made a bad decision. Don't let it define you." His words were kind, but they did little to ease the guilt and shame I felt. The following week, I started seeing a therapist, hoping to gain some insight into my actions and how to move forward. The sessions were tough, each one peeling back layers of self-deception and denial. "You need to forgive yourself, Ethan," the therapist said during one session. "You've made a mistake, but that doesn't mean you're irredeemable." I nodded, her words hitting close to home. "I want to, but I don't know if Eliza and the kids can ever forgive me. That's a journey they'll have to take on their own. But you need to start with forgiving yourself," she advised. I left each session feeling a bit more hopeful, but the journey to self-forgiveness was long and fraught with setbacks. One rainy afternoon, I visited the church where Eliza and I were married. The church was empty, the silence echoing off the walls. I sat in one of the pews, memories flooding back. "God, I don't know if you're listening, but I need help," I whispered, my voice lost in the vastness of the church. I thought about the vows I had broken, the trust one had shattered. The pain I had caused my family was like a wound that refused to heal. Sitting there, in the quiet of the church, I made a promise to myself and to my family. I would do everything in my power to make things right, to earn their forgiveness, no matter how long it took. As I left the church, the rain had stopped, and a ray of sunshine broke through the clouds. It felt like a sign, a small glimmer of hope in the darkness that had become my life. In the weeks that followed, I continued therapy, each session a step towards understanding and healing. I also began writing letters to Eliza and the kids, pouring my heart out, expressing my regrets and my love for them. It was a cathartic process, but I didn't send them, not yet. They were more for me at this point, a way to articulate the chaos inside. One afternoon, I decided to visit the place where Eliza and I had our first date. The small cafe had changed little over the years. As I sat there, sipping coffee, the memories came flooding back. The nervous laughter, the shy glances, the beginning of what I thought would be a lifelong journey together. "Ethan, is that you?" A voice interrupted my reverie. It was Mrs. Jennings, our old high school teacher who had always been fond of us as a couple. "Yes, Mrs. Jennings. It's me," I replied, forcing a smile. She sat down, her expression turning somber. "I heard about what happened. I'm so sorry." "Thank you. It's been tough, but I'm trying to make things right," I said, the words feeling hollow even to me. Mrs. Jennings nodded. "Eliza is a wonderful woman, Ethan. I hope you can find a way back to each other." Her words were a balm, but also a reminder of the magnitude of what I had lost. As days turned into weeks, I started volunteering at a local shelter. It was a way to give back, to do something positive in the midst of my personal turmoil. Helping others took my mind off my problems, even if just for a little while. One day, while volunteering, I ran into an old college buddy, Dan, who had been through a rough divorce a few years back. Ethan, man, I heard about your situation. Tough break, Dan said, clapping me on the back. Yeah, it's been rough. How did you get through your divorce? I asked, curious. Dan sighed, a faraway look in his eyes. Time, therapy, and accepting that some things are out of your control. You learn to forgive yourself, and hopefully, others forgive you too. His words resonated with me, echoing what my therapist had been saying. Every night, I called to check on Eliza and the kids, each conversation a mix of hope and sadness. Eliza's voice was polite but distant, and the kids were still hesitant to talk to me. I miss you, Dad, Alex said during one call, his voice cracking. I miss you too, buddy. More than you know, I replied, fighting back tears. As I lay in bed each night, the loneliness was palpable. The mistakes I had made played over and over in my mind, a relentless reminder of the cost of my actions. But amidst the guilt and regret, there was also a growing sense of determination. I was beginning to understand the depth of my errors and the long road to redemption that lay ahead. I knew that the journey back to my family, if they would have me, would be long and uncertain. But I was committed to walking that path, no matter how difficult. In the quiet of the hotel room, I clung to the hope that someday I could earn the forgiveness of the people I loved most. The reflection in this period of solitude was painful but necessary, a crucible that was slowly reshaping me. The months in the hotel room stretched on, each day a reminder of the life I had left behind. The routine of therapy, volunteering, and solitary reflections became my new normal, a stark contrast to the life I once knew. One chilly evening, as I sat in my hotel room, the phone rang. It was Eliza. Ethan, can we meet? Her voice was calm, but I could sense an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite place. Yes, of course. When and where? I replied, my heart starting to race. Tomorrow, at the park where we used to take the kids, she said. Sleep eluded me that night. A mix of hope and fear churned inside me, the outcome of the meeting uncertain. The next day, I arrived at the park early, the memories of past family outings flooding back. I found a bench and waited, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Eliza arrived, looking as beautiful as ever, yet there was a sadness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Ethan, she greeted, sitting beside me. Eliza, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our past hanging between us. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Eliza began. About us, about our family, about what happened. I nodded, bracing myself for what was to come. I can see that you're trying, Ethan. The therapy, the volunteering. I appreciate that you're making an effort, she continued. Eliza, I'd do anything to make things right. I know I can't change the past, but I'm committed to being a better person for you, for the kids, I said earnestly. Eliza sighed, her gaze fixed on the ground. I know, and that's why this is so hard. The kids miss you. They're hurting. I'm hurting. Tears welled up in my eyes. I miss you all more than I can say. I'd give anything to go back and change what I did. Eliza turned to look at me, her eyes meeting mine. But we can't go back, Ethan. We can only move forward. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat growing. What are you saying, Eliza? She took a deep breath. I think we need to start thinking about the future, about what's best for the kids and for us. I felt a sense of dread. Are you talking about divorce? Eliza's eyes filled with tears. I don't know. I just know that we can't go back to how things were. The words hit me like a physical blow. The reality of losing my family, my life as I knew it, was overwhelming. Eliza, please, isn't there a chance for us? For our family? I pleaded. She reached out, her hand briefly touching mine. I don't know, Ethan. I wish I had the answers. We sat there, the autumn leaves swirling around us, a metaphor for the change that was enveloping our lives. I'll do whatever it takes, Eliza. I'll wait as long as it takes, I said, my voice filled with determination. Eliza nodded, a sad smile on her lips. I know you will, Ethan. And that's what makes this so hard. You're not the same man who made that mistake. You've changed. The conversation continued, a delicate dance around the pain and the possibilities that lay ahead. We talked about the kids, about how they were coping, about how we could support them through this. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, we stood up to leave. Take care, Ethan, Eliza said, her voice tinged with sadness. You too, Eliza, I replied, watching her walk away. I sat back down on the bench, alone with my thoughts. The lesson I had learned was a hard one. filled with pain and regret, but it was also filled with growth and hope. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, whether it led to reconciliation or a new beginning, but I was ready to face it, to embrace whatever the future held. As I walked out of the park, the last rays of the sun disappearing behind the trees, I felt a sense of resolve. No matter what happened, I would be a better man, a better father, a better person. I had learned my lesson, and I was determined to live it.